All right, so today we're going to talk about the second week in Primary Math 4. This is a class recording, this is Primary Math 3 in week 2. And so we'll talk about the information that we're going to go through, and we'll just do one book at a time. Again, when I was doing this with my children, I didn't work one book all the way through to the end and then start the second book. I usually assigned one exercise in the workbook, a page or two in the intensive practice, and then the word problems as well. And so they would just kind of do a page or two in each book, and it kind of kept it light and easy. And sometimes the intensive problems really are intense, and so you don't want to do too many of those pages if you're set up to do 4 pages in the workbook in the first couple of days and then a bunch of pages in the intensive practice. Sometimes it can get really intensive and you want to break that up as much as possible. So, but again, you can schedule that however it works for your family in the week, and just kind of break it up. We are in the beginning of the book. Things are not overly taxing and difficult in the start of this book, so so it shouldn't be overwhelming to you or your student yet, I don't think. This week you're going to assign in the workbook exercises 5 through 9, and I just want to kind of walk through some of those and made some notes of things that I thought might be helpful to talk about. The big thing about Singapore math is that we go from a very concrete picture understanding of what's going on, and then we move them, not even necessarily in primary 3, but we move them more and more to the abstract. And so in exercise 5, as you look at that, eventually, not even eventually, right there on part B, they show you that the difference is a subtraction problem, but we want them to understand that when we're talking about two numbers, maybe this number is 9 and this number is 7, when we're talking about the difference in two numbers, we literally mean what is different about them. This part is the difference, and you find the difference by subtracting. So that's a very concrete understanding, and many times later on we're trying to have kids memorize difference means subtract, and we're teaching them key words because they don't have the visual understanding of what it means to say the difference between two numbers. And so sum, of course, is the word that we use with addition, and we just put that together with a picture there again that shows a graph of this part is the sum, and then of course this part is the difference. And so that very concrete picture is meant to be helpful to the students. So when you get on to the next page, on page 18, and you're on number 6 with the wording, it just says find the difference between 96 and 68. They can picture a block that's 96 and picture a block that's 68 and find out how much is difference in there. And one way to think of that is to think, again, we always want to go back to tens as much as possible. If we're going from 68 to 96, if I add 2, that puts me at 70. That's 7 tens. And then if I go 2 tens more, I've gotten to 90. And 6 more than that puts me at 96. So this is all, again, takes longer to write it down, but the mental math of finding the difference between the two numbers, the way to get from 68 to 96 is to take a jump of 28, and so that's the way to find the difference. Now, there's many ways to do it, and there's certainly nothing wrong with a regular subtraction problem, but as much as possible we want to avoid the up and down borrowing carrying activity because we're trying to make it everything more of a mental math and more of a comprehension. This is doing math, and it's a great way to get the answer, but by drawing it out and having an idea of the mental math, counting, going by tens, and writing whatever down you need to. You can do it all mentally or write a few things down. Whatever it is you need to do to get to the 28 is a good plan. Seeing the number as tens and ones is very helpful in that kind of respect. When we do the word problems, exercise 6 is all about word problems, and the word problems have a couple of ways to look at things, and I want to just make sure we see those different ways to do it. On number 3, on exercise 6, Emily's going to wrap 42 presents, and we're told that she's wrapped 29 of them. How many more does she have to wrap? One way to set up a word problem, and again, they're drawing the pictures for you now, but just drawing your child's attention to the fact that there's a couple of ways that they can set them up. One is to realize that 42 is the number of the entire thing, but that 42 can be broken down into two parts, and one of them would be how many are wrapped and how many have yet to be wrapped. And so we're talking about a whole number that is broken down into two parts. And then again, to get from 29 to fill up the rest of it, I need a 1 to make it 30, I need 10 more to make it 40, and I need 2 more to make it 42. Now, maybe your child is more intuitive and they can go from 29 and say, well, I need 3 to get to the 2's. 3 and 29 is 32, and then 1 more 10. Or maybe they go from 29 to 30, and then from 30 to 42. Any of those, of course, are acceptable. And as you're talking to your student and say, well, how did you get 13 for your answer? Listen for those, because they will tell you probably one of these. This is a little less normal for them to come up with on their own. But either they'll jump from 29 to 30 and go straight to 42, or they'll do it in 3 steps. And that's the kind of verbiage we want our kids to be able to say back to us and put it back in a matter of conversation that, okay, this is how I worked the problem. This is where I saw it and where it came from there. The next one I wrote down to talk about was number 7. Same exercise, but it's on page 21. Same kind of an idea, and another problem. They're expecting them to draw the picture this time, but have your student notice, and really, I gave my kids their exercise books, and they worked them on their own. And if they came to me with a question, I answered it. But for the most part, they may never say anything to you about this. But again, part of this is keeping the parents up with the skills that the students are being taught without quite spending all the time of each problem on it. And then the other thing is, if they're having trouble drawing the pictures, because if you're just starting at primary 3, they may not be used to drawing pictures. They may be trying to do it the old way. However, they just line the math up and go right to left. And we want to encourage them to draw a picture as much as possible. So seeing in number 7 that this is the same kind of problem. They spent $200 all together, and that $200 can be divided up into the cost of the radio and the cost of the camera. And so realizing that part is radio, part is a camera, the entire amount is $200. We're told that the radio is $65, so we want to get to figure out the rest of the money, which is, by definition, of course, the difference between 200 and 65. As your child practices with the mental math, getting from 65 to 100 should become very normal to them. We're going to add 35 to get to 100, and of course another 100 gets us to $135, and that would be the price of the camera. So there's those two kinds of way, or that's one of the two styles of seeing the number problems and the word problems and knowing that type. The other kind, when you don't have a single number to work with, can be seen like, for example, in number 8, when you have 2 people, and Sam is 145 centimeters, and he's shorter than Eric. Just because we're talking about height, I would probably draw those bars vertically, but it doesn't matter which way you do it. And if Sam is 145, and he's shorter than Eric by 28, again, this makes it very concrete. We know that if Sam is 145, if this part of the bar is 145 for Sam, it's also 145 for Eric. And so intuitively, they're going to know that this is an addition problem. I have 100. If I look at my tens and have 4 tens and 2 ones, but as I glance at the ones, I know that there's going to be another 10 from that one. So 100, 7 tens. When I put the 5 and 8 together, 8 needs 2 or 5 needs 3, either way you look at that, and there's going to be 3 left over. I'm sorry, yeah, 3 left over when I add them together. And so 173 centimeters is the height that Eric has. So this one, of course, can't be drawn as one continuous number because it is actually 2 separate numbers. But being able to draw it and have the idea of Sam is shorter, so Eric has more, and we're going to add those 2 numbers together to get to the height of it. And those, in its very basic form, that's the 2 kinds of drawings that your child is going to make for these kind of word problems. On going on to a couple of times later, we're going on to 25. There's word problems on exercise 7. It's all word problems. Again, they mostly draw it out for you. They're just helping your child to see what's going on and to get used to the math involved. But going over to number 8, on exercise 8, here's the thing about mental math, because exercise 8 is all about mental math. As much as possible, we want to stretch our kids and make their mental math muscle grow so that they can do these by looking at them. And when you and I look at this, we might get a little panicky trying to add it vertically or horizontally instead of vertically. But just know that in this first page especially, they don't have any carrying going on. There's nothing that they're doing that they're going to have to combine tens and ones. It's just a very straight look at it and keep your place values. And so looking at the top, we're just trying to make sure in that very first thing hung up by clothespins, when you're adding these, this is a ones digit and you're going to combine it with your ones digit, and of course that's very easy to do. But even when they get to the very bottom problems, I'm looking at the very last one on the left hand side, 9,150 plus 320, again, we're in primary 3. We're not making it hard yet. We're not, on this page at least, we're not even carrying and combining anything. It's just a straight, I have 9 in the thousands place. I have a 1 and a 3 in the hundreds place. We're teaching our kids to train their eyes to see the ones and the tens and the hundreds as separate entities. So when they add like this, they can just go straight across and realize I have 9,470, and that's where it's gonna be. As much as possible, even on page 26. Turning the page to page 26, now we do begin to do some carrying. This is addition, so it's carrying, not borrowing. But on these problems, they line it up like we're used to seeing it in our, I'll call it American math, but resist the urge to go right to left, continue going the left to right. But what we're going to notice here is before we look at the tens, we're looking at the ones and realizing that we're going to have an extra 1 and there's 2 left over. And so it's not, they're baby stepping us up. First we did the horizontal numbers and nothing carried. Now we're going to do some vertical numbers, and yes, we do have some carrying all the way down to the very last one, 6,355 and 824. It becomes a skill where they can look at the 6 and the 3 and the 8 at the same time and realize that that's going to be a 7, and that I now have 1 in this column. And then when I look at the next group, I don't have an extra 1 coming, so that 1 is going to be all that I have to worry about. And then when I look at the final group, once again, I have nothing extra coming over, so the 7 and the 9 are all that there is in the group. And I would say that as much as possible, ask your student to do, in a sense, as few problems a day as they need to, or in one sitting, so that you can continue doing them all left to right, even if they do 4 and they walk away and do something else for a while and come back and do a few more, because I really do think it's like a muscle, and the more you do it, the more stamina you have, the more you can do in one sitting. But if it's frustrating them, obviously there's plenty of opportunities to frustrate your child on things besides your math page. And so, they try to make it fun with our little letters that match above and try and find that out. I do always make my kids cover that up and answer all the questions and then check their work that way, is how I do with my children, because otherwise it becomes a guessing game and you don't have to know how to do the math. You can just know that an E has to go in that spot and do it quickly. And that's no good. No cheating on the fun pages. On the word problems there, as they go, we always go from concrete to abstract. When the word problem is presented without a picture, then obviously your child can figure out where they are on the continuum of concrete and abstract. They can certainly draw a picture, and it may be a problem that you say, surely we don't need a picture, isn't that easy? And they just want to draw the picture, and if it gives them comfort, great. And then on the other hand, it may be something you look at and say, well, don't you need to draw a picture? But they have a mental picture, and so they don't necessarily have to have that on their own. You can just let them do, kind of grow on their own, when, as they move along that continuum at their own speed. How soon can they lose it? Well, as soon as they're getting them correct, and as long as they understand the problem without a picture, it doesn't matter of course, if they draw the picture or not, just what they're comfortable with. And then I would say finally the last one for this week is exercise 9, and that is more challenging. Again, there's 9 problems. You are borrowing and carrying on several levels. I'll just look at letter H again, just to give you how it looks. And if your child has colored pencils, I'm using my lovely little highlighter. It doesn't hurt, anything that makes them more cheerful about doing it. Sometimes you give a child an opportunity to use color and it just makes them happy. But when I look at these 2 numbers, clearly from the hundreds column, I'm going to have another one, another 1,000, another 10 hundreds to make the 1,000 out of it. And I've never actually drawn this line, put a 0 up there. When I did it, I'm doing it more to show you what I'm thinking in my head. But if it gave your child one more step towards concrete to do that and made it concrete, and then they take the abstract step the next go around, that's okay too. When I'm looking at 6 and 8, I'm definitely going to have a 10 for that one. And the 10 is going to leave me with 4 extras. And I'll have that 100. 10 tens makes the 100. And finally, looking at the last column, again, I'll have another 10. With 4 left over, and so I have 4,144. Nope, 54. Where did I miss that one? That's right. So when I had the 10 from the ones, I just didn't add that in. Talking and writing at the same time is deceptively difficult. So so as much as possible on that one, having them go left to right, explaining to them again how the goal here is not to get this page done as fast as possible, it's to learn to do math well. And although this will be slower in the short term, it will make it a longer, a shorter process for them in the long term. Then the only other book this week, we're not starting the word problems for a while, and that's just because I want the information and the practice to be there before we get to the word problems. And so in this first couple of weeks, we have a little bit shorter assignments, and that's okay, because again, the point is not to spend hours and hours and hours on math. The point is to do it well and to let it sink in deep. And so especially if you're introducing the mental math for the first time, then that's a good thing. On the intensive practice, that very first page has A through J. We're trying to be mental. We're trying to go left to right. Again, breaking this down into as many days as you need to, or as many parts as you need to. That's really the most intensive page. And so if you just did the across one day, again, just giving you ideas of how to break it down and make it a bite-sized chunk for your child. If they did page 12 and they did all of the across problems, and then they did page 13 and that was the first day, and then they did page 12, the down problems on the crossword, and they did page 14. That's a good way to get, 3 pages done in 2 days without overwhelming them. If that crossword looks overwhelming because there's so many problems on it, then they can, anything like that you can do to break it down is a good thing. They begin to use more and more the terms that we want to help our kids be comfortable with on page 14. And again, this is a small thing that is huge in becoming good at mental math. The question is how many hundreds are in the sum of 2,387 and 2,813. Of course, we're talking about sum, so that's an addition, and the question is how many hundreds are there? So we want our kids to be able to say this is 23 hundreds and this is 28 hundreds. And we're going to combine those, but of course, when you put 87 ones and 13 ones together, there's another 100 in that. And so I think the Singapore math books are sometimes confusing. Do they just want to know the fact that there's 300s and 800s? And the fact that that's 1100s makes me think that they're going to include the thousands. And so what they want us to do is realize that we have 4 thousands and 11 hundreds, I should say 40 tens and 11 tens, and then there's one more 100 in that. And so all together, when we put it together, there are 52 hundreds is the answer they're looking for, but that's not intuitive with the way we think of numbers, because when we might call that 2300, but we don't think of that as having 23 hundreds. And so when the book is worded this way and your child is not understanding what it's asking, hopefully this will help you to see what they're looking for. And basically you could start by just combining them all together. Again, looking at the numbers, I'm going to have 5 in the thousands place. I'm going to have 2 in the hundreds place, and it does all go to zeros. And so the fact that this is 52 hundreds is an important part of learning to look at the numbers a different way, because when we do mental math, and again those examples will come up later on, and that's the important thing, is to do this part correctly so that the mental math of later is not a confusion. So then on number 5, when it talks about the sum of 8 thousands and 41 tens, being able to write 8 thousands and 41 tens, and of course adding those is easy. And I do think that we should write that down. I don't think that they're necessarily expected to go from this idea to writing down an answer, but to recognize that 8 thousands looks like this, and especially that 41 tens is 410 is a very important part of their mental math strategy to solve those. The next thing I marked to talk with you about is on page 20, back a ways, but there's the word problems. Again, they draw them, they're very concrete, but I just wanted to kind of draw your attention to a few pages later on page 20, number 23. When it tells us the difference between two numbers is 176, and the larger number it gives us as 1,164. Again, the same idea of what we drew before, what we talked about when we first started this, and that is to just realize what that number means and what that explanation means. The difference between the two numbers is 176, and the larger number, the entire thing, is 1,164. And we're trying to find what the smaller number is. Really good chance once they get to this point they know how to solve it. And again, we're going to work hard on doing the subtraction without necessarily going up and down in a vertical right to left way. Another way, as you're working with your child on the mental math to know how to do this, notice that 1,164, I could subtract 164, and then I would have 12 left to subtract after that, because 176 is 164 and 12 more. And so again, at first you write it all down, and then eventually they just do it in their head without having to write everything down. But if I perform this first subtraction, I'm down to 1,000, and then subtracting 12 and getting 988 is a pretty quick and easy thing. So another strategy for subtracting when you have a problem, and which strategy do you use? Well, it depends on what the problem looks like. But since I have 164 and I'm subtracting just a little more than that, it's often easier to start with the 164 and get rid of that, and then just have 12 left to take away. So again, sometimes in a problem we draw it as a 2-block problem. And then last one, let's talk about number 24 immediately afterwards, which is the sum of 3 numbers is 9,999. So I have an entire block of 9,999, and I know it's divided into 3 numbers. Again, helping your child understand, I don't care how big the numbers are. It might realistically be that one number is tiny and the 2 numbers are huge. It doesn't matter in our representation. I don't have to have my blocks the right sizes. I'm just trying to get an idea visually of what's going on. 2 of the numbers, I'm told, are 2001 and 1997, and I'm trying to find the third one. If I were trying to do this mentally, I might realize that I could take one of these and put it up here, and that would be like having 2,000 in this block and 1,998 in this block. To get all the way up to 9,999, I need one more, to make my 998 to be 999. And in my thousands place, I currently have 2,000 and 1,000, and I want to have 9,000, so that tells me that I need 6,000 more in my thousands. So this last number that I'm being asked to find must be 6,001. And so by using the fact that I can make the 1,000 out of it and kind of shuffle the numbers around, I'm not changing the amount in those two blocks, I'm just changing one of my numbers from one block to the next. And these kinds of problems can be what I call sit and soak. You don't have to go through them really quickly, drawing them, letting them think about it. They could easily go all the way up to 10,000 and subtract 1 instead of aiming for 9,099. 9,999. Lots of ways to do that, but overall we're just working towards getting really comfortable with numbers and comfortable with not making a math problem and doing it vertically right to left every time is a great way to start. And that is the information for the week 2 class recording.